I used to think that, okay, just the California state is implementing a data protection regulation, but that's no more the case. Since 2020, 19 US states have implemented laws.
Can you make consent a marketing moment? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds, the podcast for growth marketers. My name is Chuck here. It's kind of an interesting moment in the global app business. We've gone through almost a decade of the age of privacy, but many still, believe it or not, don't know how to legally collect data in Europe. And those that do treat the transaction like an unpleasant legal conversation. How do you make it, dare we say, awesome? To chat, we have Jerome. He's the CEO at Acceptio, CRO at Acceptio.
Yeah, not the CEO.
Former CMO at Purchasely, former VP growth at Altice Media. Acceptio is a CMP, a consent management platform. Welcome, Jerome. Almost gave you a promotion there.
Hello, John. Nice to meet you. I'm very happy to be here. So Romain Bessuge is our CEO and co-founder. Acceptio is a French company. We are a leading consent management platform. We are used by 70,000 websites all over the world. And we have launched in the last quarter, we have launched our mobile app SDK. So that's why we started to discuss.
Very cool.
Happy to be here.
So we want to go all through this. So we want to talk about making consent sexy, good, brand aligned, all that stuff. But first, couple other things. When we chatted earlier, you said the party's over, right? You said regulators, especially in Europe, had focused on the web initially, right? GDPR and that sort of stuff. Now they're looking at apps. For example, the French Data Protection Authority just released a 98-page document with guidelines for apps. Voodoo got a $3 million fine. What's going on?
Yeah, so for your US audience, so the GDPR is in place since 2018. For the first 2 years, let's say that the national data protection bodies were educating the market, but since 2020 and 2021, there is a large number of cases against different organizations, whatever the size are. And right now in Europe, and I know that for people that are not used to, it's a little bit annoying to see all these cookie banners, consent notice, privacy pop-up.
Let's call that all.
Yeah, they are everywhere. Even Elon Musk made a tweet a couple of weeks ago regarding that. So, so the situation in European Union is that it's mandatory to collect consent on websites, and the focus and the energy of all data protection bodies have been directed to websites. But for, let's say, in the last 2 years, more and more cases are happening on the mobile app ecosystem. And you mentioned that the French data protection body is a little bit in advance when you compare to other countries in Europe. So, for example, when they discovered that Voodoo was not collecting at all user consent during the onboarding at the launch of the app, they launched an investigation, a 3 million euro fine, and now the first screen when you are opening Voodoo games, first screens is consent management. What is also important is that consent management is not, let's say, the native authorizations set up by Apple and Google regarding access to mic, access to the camera. So consent is a
or
legal
even access to IDFA, right? I mean, like ATT is Apple process and standard, and it's not government regulation.
Yeah. So what is important to understand is that user consent is a legal object. So you need to explain to the end user, okay, I will collect data from you in order to do something. And by something, it could be myself as a company or also my subcontractors. So so that's a two-side approach. Access to technical resources of the smartphone on one side, and also explain the purposes of the data collection on the other side. That's a concept that is not very well known across the app economy by global company, because obviously the US market is the biggest one. So there is no such mandatory approach to display something on mobile apps. But more and more US companies are displaying such a consent flow during the onboarding.
Yeah, exactly. And you gave me the example when we were chatting earlier about an Israeli company that was like they were publishing apps in the EU and they were thinking, hey, we're not European. We don't live in Europe. We don't work in Europe. We don't have to live by the GDPR. And of course, they were wrong because if you're doing business in Europe, then you're governed by European regulation. But it is challenging, right? Different countries have very different standards. You've got the EU. It could differ a little bit in the countries within the EU as well. The US has its own standards. The FTC recently gave a warning. You mentioned Texas, where we were chatting earlier as well. They've started initiating some cases. So it's kind of a patchwork in the US for state to state. The UK has issued some warnings about this. How do you manage all the diversity here? I mean, it's worse than currencies.
So let's say that globally you have three different areas. You have the first one, so countries that are implementing either GDPR or very similar regulation. For example, in Canada, in the French-speaking part of Canada, in Quebec, they have implemented Law 25, which is a copycat of GDPR. But in Ontario or in British Columbia, there are no such laws. So, for example, in Canada, you have either you need to display something, so you need to display consent notice, privacy notice to people that are living in Quebec. But for people that are living in British Columbia, in Ontario, you are not. You have no regulation. So you need to choose. Okay, do I display something or not? And when you want to display something, you have also over-regulation that have a sensitivity to data, like the Californian one, but there is no obligation to, block any trackers before getting the user consent. You mentioned the patchwork in the US. People used to think that, just the California state is implementing a data protection regulation, but that's no more the case. Since 2020, 19 US states have implemented laws. So they have signed a bill. They have so these laws are effective. So just for January, 8 US states have new laws, and there are also 3 or 4 more states that will come in the coming 12 months. So
if you were a publisher and you thought, hey, well, if I'm going to Europe, then I need to worry about that because I'm American, I don't have to. Now you do.
Yeah. So, for example, if you take let's take a US company like Amazon. They have a very well-known subsidiary named Twitch. So, for example, if you open Twitch on your mobile phone in North America, so in the US, you will get first screen during the onboarding will be the screen to ask the authorization of the end user to launch push notification. So you have the first screen, push notification, then you have the native pop-up of Apple regarding, push notification, yes, no. And then you will get on your screen the ATT, which is not a user CMP. It's something in the gray area between the access to the technical resources and the legal framework of the user consent. So ATT is not sufficient to be compliant with GDPR. So Twitch in the US, push notification authorization plus ATT. When you are in Europe, it's not the same user onboarding flows. The first screen will be a user consent management mechanism. Then you will get the ATT. So you see that Twitch is able to display different user onboarding flows based on the different IPs, IP address. So geolocation will be a key mechanism in the future for mobile product owner, mobile product team, in order to be able to display different onboarding flows to different people. So it will be more and more complex for everybody.
It's kind of interesting because in order to get consent to process user data, you have to process some user data to know where they're from in order to know which consent requirements and regulations apply.
Yeah, and the second let's say second step of if you want to design mobile apps with a privacy by design approach. So after when you display a CMP, it's not only the data that you are collecting for yourself as a mobile app owner, but also you have different contractors. So you have all attribution analytics, A/B test, SDK, but you have also many other SDK. So you need also, as a mobile product developer or publisher, you need also to check, let's say, the quality of your contractors, and you need to assess, let's say, the capacity of your contractor to follow the law. So in the US, for example, there is a case. So the US state of Texas is suing a big insurance company named Allstate because they were giving money to mobile app publishers and very big names in order to implement a mobile app SDK that is published by one of their subsidiary named Arity, in order to collect data and to do business with all this data. And so the US, the state of Texas is suing this company because they said, okay, guys, like you say, the party is over. You need to get consent because you are collecting, you are harvesting data from many devices. And so one of the key issue in the future is to have very sustainable relationship with your different SDK providers.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so CMP exists so that you can centralize that. You can apply the right consent management processes to the right geos. So the consent management platform knows the laws and regulations everywhere, theoretically, and you don't have to know that. You just have to comply and follow with it. So you have different regulations in the EU, different regulations in California versus Texas versus Washington versus British Columbia versus Quebec, all that stuff, and other.
And you have also regulation in Brazil, in India,
exactly,
in Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. Now, how do you make that not suck? Because as an app developer, you want your onboarding process to be awesome, to be quick, to feel great, to lead somebody into a long-lasting relationship with your company and your app, right? Engagement and all that stuff. As a mobile app user, you've downloaded a new app and you want to have fun. Maybe it's a game. You want to get some work done. Maybe it's a productivity app. You want to do what you downloaded the app to do. How do you make this process not completely suck?
What we see on the market is that this issue has already been solved or tackled by other features. So, for example, remember 10 years ago when people were downloading app and the first thing that appeared on the screen was native use of Apple. Subscribe to push notification. Next one, subscribe to geolocation. So mobile product team have developed skills in order to explain the value prop of all these features. So geolocation, push notification. And so we are saying to the market, guys, you need to do just one more step in order to explain the value of, okay, we are collecting data because it's essential for operating the app. It's essential for knowing your habit to deliver personalized content, personalized services. Okay, we will deliver also personalized advertising. So we are seeing in the market, and that's a global trend across GDPR geos. 5 years ago, the CMP and the cookie notice were a legal topic. So that's no more the case. we are seeing more and more personalization. People are playing with the messaging in order to improve the opt-in rate. So this legal constraint should be switched into a mobile marketing moment in order to deliver a first good impression. So that's very, very, when you are entering into a physical shop in the street, you are not signing an NDA at the entrance. So people are saying, welcome, here are new stuff, there is promotion. Do you want coffee? For example, look at Nespresso boutique all over the world. There is a welcoming process. So we see that the concept management is one piece of this welcoming and onboarding process.
So in other words, you can embed it into your onboarding, and at the same time as you're talking about the features of your app or your game, you're explaining why you need certain things from the user in order to make them function.
Exactly. So be transparent, educate the users. There is no negative effect if you do so. If you hide everything, okay, I don't want to display on the first session or in the first week, and if you hide the capacity to do the settings somewhere into the account, and you need to tap on five screens in order to discover that, there will be a backlash. What we have seen in Europe is that people are more and more, by people I mean end users, are more and more educated regarding these topics. And there is also some activists. So you mentioned Voodoo. Just before Christmas, an organization which is very well known in Europe named Neube, based in Austria, they made a complaint to Voodoo again, not because of Voodoo games, but because of the subsidiary of Voodoo, the famous social app Be Real. Mm-hmm. So there is an official complaint in France because some Austrian people are not happy about the behavior of the Be Real app. So you see, there is no Chinese wall between the different countries. You can be sued by anybody regarding different regulation.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So one thing I've started wondering is we have a new administration in power in the US, happened yesterday. This will probably publish in a week, but it happened yesterday for us right now. We've already seen a pretty combative tone from that administration towards lots of people, lots of countries, including the EU. And we've seen people like Elon, who are close to that, Elon Musk, who are close to that administration, ask the EU, and also I think Mark Zuckerberg ask the administration to push back on some of the regulation and some of the fines that American companies have going into EU. Do you see this getting more tense? Do you see this getting more divergent between the United States and Europe?
So I don't know which, between the US states and the federal level, which will be the winner regarding, because we have described the patchwork a couple of minutes ago, and obviously the Trump administration would like to remove every barriers in many markets. What is important for me and for us is the speech of Mark Zuckerberg when he was interviewed by Joe Rogan in his 3-hour podcast. The Mark Zuckerberg was pretty clear. He said, okay, all this European regulation and all this privacy stuff, that's just arguments to put barriers to entry for US companies. So we need to replicate, and I'm joining Trump because Trump will defend my business. So
Interesting.
The tension between the US and the European view, which is very focused on regulation, negotiation, compromise, and the direct straight to the point and remove everything and let's disrupt many topics by the Trump administration, there will be a very intense moment. But from a global perspective, I mentioned India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, data protection regulation are widespreading all over the world. Not with the same intensity, but that's a global trend. It's not just a view of some technocrat of the European Commission. There is a law in Paraguay, for example, in Chile, in Argentina.
Yes. Yes.
Global trend versus the US disruption that is happening with the Trump administration. Yes, there will be very strange moment in the coming months and maybe in the coming weeks.
Yes, it will be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think that's the right answer is like, not only globally in these countries that you mentioned, Paraguay, Saudi Arabia, India. India is a huge one, obviously.
Yeah.
Reels became massive in India. 200 million people were on TikTok in India. TikTok banned TikTok you couldn't even get it from the App Store, but you couldn't even use it if you had it on your app as well. And Reels was a massive beneficiary there. So India has its own data protection laws, and if Meta wants to be in that space and play in that space, they're going to have to comply, right? So I think that, but also all the American states that are having this, and actually there was a federal law that was drafted, not enacted for privacy, data privacy law.
Yeah.
In the U.S. in the past couple of years. So that may come back, probably not in this administration, but possibly in a future one, I would say.
Yeah.
Interesting world.
And there was also a federal law discussed at the Canadian Parliament in the past 2 years, but as the Prime Minister is leaving his office, there will be maybe another debate. So
yeah, exactly. Maybe before we end, you mentioned the French Data Protection Authority. We talked about that. They released this 98-page document.
Yeah,
March is a significant date for this. March is that when this takes effect, or is this when they're starting to look at everything more closely? What's the significance of March, especially in France?
So the French Data Protection Authority, the PNIL, has not only published the 98-page report, but they are translating that report because that was the first European data protection body to release a document dedicated to mobile apps.
Wow.
So they are translating the document in English, and they are sending the document to the other European data protection authorities in Europe. So there will be some kind of propagation of these guidelines. So right now, there, as the voodoo case, mobile apps should comply to the GDPR, but the French data protection body has no ability right now to launch an enforcement campaign because there was some doubt and some gray area in the very old GDPR guidelines. But as they have released this 98 pages document, they say to the market, okay, now everything is clear. So because they publish guidelines for app stores, SDK providers, mobile development agencies, and also obviously to mobile app publishers. So now they say, okay, you have all the topic on the table. Just read the playbook, and we will launch an enforcement campaign. They say in March, but now it's more April. It's let's say mid-spring. And they can do whatever they want. So if they want to open TikTok, and I just did the test just before the recording. If you open TikTok in France, there are no consent collection mechanism at all. So if they want to create problem to TikTok, that's super easy for the French data protection body. Just opening the app and discover that, okay, no user consent is collected. Here we have an issue. So any app that is targeting not only France, but also European market should, like Twitch, should implement a consent management flow within my mobile app in order to comply. And that's, let's say, as I said before, for the first 5 years of GDPR, websites were very affected. Mobile apps were super quiet. They were harvesting data, and if you type data harvesting on Google News, you will find many articles, New York Times, some cases regarding automotive. So more and more cases. By the way, I will be on stage at a mobile marketing conference in New York in March, and we will explain, okay, what is the difference between Europe, US, and illustrate by some cases and some discrepancy between apps regarding IP.
What conference is that, Jerome?
App Growth Summit.
Okay, excellent. And thanks for sharing the stuff about the French Data Protection Authority in March, which is now April. Knowing how things work in Europe, France sending around this document, other countries are going to look at that. They're gonna adapt their own policies. But it's much easier to build something when you have a starting point. Now they have a starting point. And we may see even a revision of GDPR to bring that in, or have an addition or something like that. But it's important to take a look at that. And especially if you're a massive publisher, I'd be a little worried right now. I know TikTok's really focused on the US situation, but Europe is also big for them. If they have no consent at all, that's a little bit of a worrisome situation.
Yeah, and just to finish, not only the EU, because in the UK, the ICO has sent a clear warning in January 24 to the overall mobile app market in the UK, because they were investigating women health and fertility app, and they discovered that it was sensitive data were not only collected, but also redistributed, sold. And so they say, okay, we should do something. So it's not only the EU, it's EU plus UK. There is a law in Switzerland, there's a law in Norway. So let's say that the overall Europe is in the same situation. So even if you are a medium app providing women's women health services, and if you have a certain volume of user base in Europe, you should be very cautious regarding data privacy, integration of SDK, and collecting data.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking this time. I really appreciate the information.
Thank you, John.